Hello friends, John Laspina here, your carnivore teacher. Today we're going to talk about brain chemicals that make you happy. There are 4 of them. Before I start, please click the thumbs up and share this video if you find that you like this content. And if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments. I get back to every single person who writes a comment. So the 4 brain chemicals that make us happy, they're like drugs, but they're natural, and we can produce them in our brains, are dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Have you heard of those 4? Let's break each one of those down just briefly so that you understand where we get those chemicals, how to get more of those chemicals when we want them. Because we don't want to give our body artificial chemicals to make us feel good. You know what I'm talking about. And I'm talking about drugs. But I'm also talking about caffeine. I'm talking about nicotine, talking about some legal drugs as well as prescription drugs and illegal drugs. They all have to mix with the chemicals in our own body because they are chemicals, and they unbalance our hormones. And then there's always an equal and opposite reaction to when you do something. You do something artificially, there's an equal and opposite reaction that you have to go through. Sometimes it's a headache or a low or a depression. So let's talk about dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. We'll start with dopamine. I use that word a lot on my channel. Dopamine hits. Give yourself dopamine hits when you do some fun things. You get a dopamine hit. Those are good things. Well, it's the reward chemical, dopamine. And if you complete a task, let's say you have to cut the lawn, it's a chore, you don't want to do it, it's hot and humid outside, but once you finish it and you come inside, you get a dopamine hit. There's a chemical that gets released in your brain that is called dopamine. It makes you feel good because you completed a task. It feels good to check those things off your list. I know I get huge dopamine hits when I get things accomplished. How about you? Do you? Another dopamine hit could be doing self-care activities. So when you are shaving, when you are taking care of your body, when you are taking a shower and soaping up and just taking care of yourself, you get dopamine hits. Celebrating little wins. You accomplish something and you give yourself a little celebration. That's a dopamine hit. Celebrating little wins. Getting enough sleep actually gives you dopamine. If you get a healthy 7 to 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep, you get free dopamine. Great ways to get dopamine. Let's talk about oxytocin. Oxytocin is the love hormone. When you play with your pet, when you pet a dog or hold a cat and feel the cat purring, and you get that nice feeling inside, that's oxytocin. It's almost a feeling of love because dogs and cats give us unconditional love. They're harmless, they depend on us, and they give us so much joy. That joy that you're feeling is called oxytocin. It's very healthy. Another one would be playing with a baby, similar to a pet, right? But a baby. Babies are human, beautiful creatures that have the ability to become an Einstein. Play with a baby. We smile when we say the word baby because babies are just beautiful. Little miniature versions of ourselves, right? And we know that we were babies. Okay, talking to a loved one, whether it's on the phone or whether it's on FaceTime, when you have a conversation with someone you love, you're giving yourself oxytocin. I know when I get on the phone and talk to my brother or sister, I like it. It feels good. And when I hang up, I guess that's oxytocin because I was spending time, even though it was on the phone, with a loved one. And random acts of kindness. When you do something for somebody else, randomly, they didn't ask you to do it, you weren't obliged to do it, you weren't owed to do it. You just did something out of the kindness of your heart because you're a good person. That makes you feel good to do good things for people. It really does. You stop along the side of the road because you know how to change a tire and somebody is standing on the side of the road upset and frustrated because they have a flat tire and you help them and you change their tire out of nowhere. You give yourself a hit of oxytocin. All right, let's move on to serotonin. You've heard of serotonin, right? This is called the mood stabilizer. And there are drugs that will inhibit the uptake of serotonin, so there's more of it in your brain. They're called SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And a lot of those drugs fall into the depression category. People who are depressed want more serotonin, so they'll take those drugs. Unfortunately, there's a side effect to every single drug you take. So how do we increase the serotonin in our brains? The mood stabilizer, through sun exposure. Go out into the sun and get some good sun exposure. Get as much exposure on your skin. Don't get burnt, but when you're not eating seed oils like we carnivores and keto people do, we can get more sunlight and not turn red and burn. I know I can. Sun is extremely healthy. Helps us process our vitamin D. It helps generate cholesterol, the healthy stuff that we need. Sun exposure actually promotes the growth of melatonin for later in the night when you have to sleep. Sun exposure is required for good health, and it stabilizes your mood as well. I know when I go out in the sun, it just feels so good. Am I feeling the warmth that feels good, or am I getting serotonin hits in my brain? I think a little bit of both. Meditating, if you do boxed breathing, where I talk about holding your breath for 5 seconds, exhaling for 5 seconds, and holding for 5 seconds, exhaling for 5. You do this a bunch of times. You are giving yourself serotonin because you're meditating, you're breathing, you're doing mindfulness. You're giving yourself a mood stabilizing chemical called serotonin. When you walk in nature, especially barefoot, grounding, feel the grass and the dirt, the stones, the pebbles, the sand beneath your feet while you're in the sunlight. And just walking in nature with your eyes looking at the ducks and the birds and the trees and the oxygen, the air, the fresh air, the brightness of the sunshine, the beautiful clouds, the sound of the wind going by your ear, that gives you a serotonin hit. Why not, right? It's so healthy. And if you ever journal, if you do a diary or you write down all of your thoughts, your frustrations, your angers, your happinesses, your joys, all you journal, you write it all out. You're getting all of that onto paper, or if you're typing it, you're getting it onto the screen. That releases serotonin. So if you're a writer, when you write, that feeling of expression gives you serotonin. So let's get our dopamine, our oxytocin, and our serotonin by doing all these things. Last one I'm going to talk about is endorphins. Endorphins give us what? That's what we get when we're exercising, and they're actually painkillers. If you have endorphin, it quells pain in your body. It does. When you exercise, you're giving yourself endorphins. If you've ever jogged and sprinted and then stopped and you're breathing real heavily and you're sweating, then there's a moment where you get this little fireworks in your brain. That's endorphins. And I know what that feels like. It's a great feeling. If you're lifting weights and you're pushing it and you're doing it harder and harder till you feel the burn in your muscle, then you relax and rest. And before you do your next set, you get a little hit of endorphins. It feels good. That's why people like to exercise. That's why they like to work out. Even though it's work, and even though sometimes there's a little bit of discomfort involved, you get that as endorphins, which is really kind of cool. You can get endorphins by eating a good meal, eating a healthy meal, which I believe is the carnivore way of eating. Eating chocolate. Chocolate's on the list. And chocolate is known for giving endorphins. I think it's known more for giving oxytocin. I don't know, because it's the love hormone. But chocolate has been associated with Valentine's Day and love because it makes you feel good, whether it's the endorphins or the oxytocin. I stay away from chocolate. You know what I'm going to say, right? Because it's extremely high in oxalate. Oxalate is those little microscopic shard of glass type substances that are in certain things like spinach, rhubarb, and dark chocolate that they build up in your body, and then when it's time to dump, they hurt. like a kidney stone or like arthritis or problems. So even though chocolate can give you endorphins, I recommend not eating chocolate. Or if you're going to eat chocolate, eat some milk chocolate, maybe sweetened with monk fruit stevia or allulose and no seed oils. I say stay away from chocolate, so forget that that's on the list. I got this list from the internet. So brain chemicals that make you happy and how to hack them is to do some of those things I just mentioned. Ladies and gentlemen, eat the proper human diet, which I believe is the carnivore way of eating, and you too can get your endorphin hits, your oxytocin hits, your serotonin hits, your dopamine hits, and you will smile every day, just like I and all the other keto carnivore people do. Have a great day, everybody.